My name is Mandy Calloway. I'm 38 years old. And this is the story of how a $3 million victory turned into my most humiliating defeat, and how that same betrayal led me to the most powerful comeback of my life. I was still holding a glass of champagne when I saw the email that gutted me. 1 minute, I was surrounded by clapping hands and camera flashes, toasted by executives for closing the company's biggest deal in 2 years. The next, I was staring at my phone with a cold knot forming in my stomach. Subject: salary adjustment notification. I tapped it open without thinking. Maybe some congratulations from the CFO, maybe a performance bonus fast-tracked for approval. But it wasn't that. Not even close. Effective immediately, your base salary has been adjusted to reflect recent performance concerns. Details to follow. That's it. No, thank you for securing $3 million. No, great work under pressure. Just sterile corporate betrayal dressed in HR stiff vocabulary. Blink. Read it again. And then again. The crowd around me blurred, their voices distant, muffled like I was underwater. The glass trembled in my hand. A part of me genuinely thought it was a mistake. Some automated error, some crossed wire. I excused myself from the celebration and locked myself in the nearest bathroom stall like a kid who'd just been dumped at prom. But deep down I knew. This wasn't an accident. It was a message. The real punch wasn't even the pay cut. It was the timing. The insult. The audacity of handing me a victory, only to snatch the reward away while the confetti was still falling. My whole career I'd been told to work hard, keep my head down, prove my value. And I had. For 7 straight years. From junior account rep to senior manager, I built my name on results. I had survived corporate mergers, 2 rounds of layoffs, and 3 department heads. I mentored every new hire who walked through our door and signed some of the most difficult clients in the company's history. And this was what I got. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay on my couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the buzz of silence in my apartment, the kind that crawls under your skin and makes you question everything you thought you knew. I opened old emails from former bosses, performance reviews that called me indispensable, future executive material, a cornerstone of client trust. All lies now. Or worse, truths that no longer mattered. Monday morning I showed up to the office like a ghost. Eyes hollow, smile painted on like cracked makeup. People nodded at me like nothing had happened. The celebration photos were still circulating on Slack, but no one said a word about the email. I kept waiting for someone to pull me into a room, explain it all, walk it back. No one did. Instead, I got another email. This one from Leonard Parks himself, our new CEO, a man with perfect teeth and ice in his veins. Mandy, I'd like to align briefly today. Let me know when works. Align. That was the word he used. Not talk, not meet, not even chat. Just corporate camouflage for prepare yourself. I stepped into his office at 2 p.m. sharp. His windows stretched from floor to ceiling, and I watched my own reflection ripple across the glass like a woman about to jump. Mandy, he said, not even bothering to look up from his laptop. I trust you've seen the adjustment memo. I didn't sit. I closed a $3 million deal last week. That was 14% over projections. You think I don't deserve my full salary? He looked up then, slowly, like I'd interrupted something terribly important. It's not about one deal, he said. It's about trajectory, leadership tone, energy. Energy. That word hit me like a slap. I felt it crack something inside my ribs. He kept talking, jargon spilling out like motor oil. Future alignment, strategic evolution, new blood. All of it a polite way to say, we're pushing you out. And we're not going to pay you to leave. I walked out of that room with my hands shaking and my spine made of steel. I knew in that moment that I had 2 choices. Bend quietly and disappear like they wanted. Or watch them from the shadows and wait for my moment. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. But something in me turned cold. The kind of cold that doesn't melt. The rest of that week passed like I was living in a body that wasn't mine. I performed the motions. Meetings, emails, presentations. But the Mandy that used to live in that office chair? She wasn't there anymore. What remained was something quieter. Sharper. Something patient. On Wednesday afternoon, I ducked out for a late lunch to clear my head. The cold air bit at my face as I crossed the street to the tiny cafe where I used to celebrate closed deals with coworkers who had either left or been laid off. I ordered a coffee I didn't want, sat near the back corner, and stared out the window at my own reflection in the glass. That's when Chris sat down across from me. He didn't say hello. Didn't ask how I was. He just leaned in and said, "Word is, the board's getting nervous." And blinked. "Nervous about what?" "You," he said. "And others like you." Chris wasn't just anyone. He was the quiet guy who everyone underestimated. But if there was a pulse to the company's political undercurrent, he had his finger on it. He didn't gossip, but he knew things. They expected budget cuts, he continued, but not targeting the top closers. That $3 million deal you signed. Parks didn't just blindside you. He blindsided them. "It's starting to look personal." I sat there barely breathing. "What do you mean, personal?" He sipped his tea, then said slowly, "He's using high performers like you as sacrificial proof. Show the board he's slashing costs aggressively. Your salary reduction. It wasn't about your work. It was about his optics." A low buzz started in my ears. "If enough people come forward," Chris added, "the board might move on him. But they'll need more than rumors. They'll need documentation." I hesitated for half a second before whispering, "I have it." Chris raised his eyebrows slightly. "Then the question is, are you ready to use it?" That night, I pulled out the folder I had hidden in the back of my filing cabinet. I had kept it out of habit, maybe fear, maybe instinct. It held copies of every performance review I'd received over the past 7 years. Every glowing remark, every signed approval, every quantifiable proof of value. There were emails from Mr. Harland, our former CEO, calling me indispensable. There were contracts I had closed, margins I had protected, revenue I had secured. And tucked near the bottom, a memo Dana from HR had accidentally left on my desk, the same one that listed me among the first wave of cost-saving opportunities, 1 week before the Parks-led celebration. I organized the documents into a timeline. Events, signatures, praise, deal closures, then sudden performance concerns, salary reduction. A direct link from my cost-saving salary cut to Parks's own performance bonus. Because that's what it was. He hadn't just undercut me. He'd used me. My numbers. My achievements. He had taken it all and reframed it as proof of his ruthless efficiency. The board hadn't even blinked. Not yet, because Parks had spun the story so well, so tightly, they didn't realize they were being manipulated. But I did. And now I had the proof. The following Monday I printed everything. Put it in a manila folder. Slid a USB into an envelope addressed to a single board member. One I knew from industry events, someone with a reputation for integrity. I didn't trust many, but this one, I trusted just enough. No grand reveal. No angry email. Just truth, quietly sent through interoffice mail. Like a whisper no one could trace back to me, yet. Told no one. Not even Chris. But I walked differently that week. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't hoping to be saved. I was just waiting. And then came Friday. That morning the office had a different air. You could taste it. Like electricity before a storm. People looked up from their screens more slowly. Phones were answered more cautiously. The elevator felt like a coffin on a string. At 9:57 a.m., an all-staff email hit every inbox simultaneously. Emergency board session. Attendance mandatory. 10 a.m. Conference Hall B. 3 minutes. That's all the notice they gave. I didn't need more. I walked into the room, took a seat near the back and waited. Not for drama. Not for vengeance. Just for the truth to finally have its turn. Leonard Parks walked in at 10:01, flanked by 2 board assistants and our CFO, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Parks gave his usual tight smile, nodded at people, and took the center seat at the head of the table. The chairman of the board stood. His expression was unreadable. "We'll keep this brief," he said. "There are questions that require immediate clarification." Parks straightened. He wasn't smiling anymore. Documents began to circulate. Printed pages and screenshots. I recognized every single one. My chest tightened, but I didn't flinch. Questions began. Not loud, not hostile, just calm, methodical. Why were high-performing employees being targeted for salary reductions? Why were those cost savings directly tied to bonus metrics? Why had key performance indicators been altered after the fact? Parks tried to pivot, to redirect, to dazzle. But this wasn't a shareholder meeting. This was a surgical inquest. And the scalpel was truth. Parks began with a performance. He always had a flair for spin, for turning accountability into strategic foresight, and concern into leadership vision. He adjusted his cufflinks, sat straighter in his seat, and let loose a string of buzzwords that, on any other day, might have worked. "This company," he said, voice smooth as silk over poison, "requires agility. We face economic headwinds, and in that context, hard decisions must be made." The board didn't blink. The chairman leaned forward, tapping a single finger on the folder in front of him. "Explain this," he said, turning the folder around so everyone could see. Bold font. Email headers. Name. I didn't breathe. Parks faltered just for a second but recovered quickly. "That's an internal discussion among senior leadership. Context is important." "Let's talk about context," another board member cut in. "A senior manager closes a $3 million contract. 3 days later she's cited for low energy and given a 40% pay cut. That's not context. That's exploitation." There it was. The room turned colder. The walls, once gleaming with sterile glass confidence, now felt like ice closing in around him. I sat in the back, hands folded in my lap, still. Quiet. Watching. Part of me felt sick. Another part, the part that had been strangled in silence for weeks, felt awake. One by one, the documents were walked through. Parks tried to feign ignorance of some, minimize others, deflect with statistics. But none of it worked. Because the evidence didn't lie. And neither did the patterns. He had built a structure of personal gain disguised as corporate necessity. Reduced salaries, repackaged them as cost victories, and tied them directly to his own performance bonuses, all while punishing the very employees generating the revenue. It was cold, calculated, and finally exposed. At 11:12 a.m., the chairman closed the final folder. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't deliver a monologue. He simply said, "Mr. Parks, you are suspended, effective immediately. A full audit will follow." Silence. The kind that rings. Parks opened his mouth to protest, but nothing came out. His eyes searched the room looking for allies, but no one met his gaze. Even the CFO, who had once shared his smug laughter at team meetings, stared at the table like it might swallow him whole. And just like that, the predator had become the prey. I didn't linger. As the room emptied, I stood slowly, collected my things, and walked past Parks without so much as a glance. I didn't need to look at him. I already knew what I'd see. A man unraveling, trying to understand how his illusion had been punctured so cleanly. I stepped outside into the chill of late morning, sunlight catching the corners of the city like shattered glass. The cold hit my face, but I didn't flinch. I breathed it in. I had done it. Not with revenge. Not with rage. With truth. The truth I had built, protected, and finally unleashed. Not to destroy but to reclaim. That night I didn't drink champagne. I didn't call anyone. I sat in my tiny kitchen with a bowl of leftover soup, and the same quiet I'd sat in when I was first betrayed. But now it felt different. A peace. Not the kind you earn with a paycheck or a title. The kind you get when you know you've faced the fire, and come out whole. Didn't fix everything. My salary was still slashed. My future with the company uncertain. And yet, I didn't care. Because something bigger had shifted. They had tried to erase me. And I had written myself back in, with ink they couldn't wash away. The following week was eerily calm. No internal memos. No sweeping announcements. Just silence. Parks had vanished. His name scrubbed from upcoming meetings. His access terminated. His assistant reassigned without a whisper of explanation. But everyone knew. The energy in the office had shifted. Like the tension after a long storm. Heavy, quiet, damp with aftermath. They didn't reinstate my salary. Not yet. But people started treating me differently. The same coworkers who used to look past me now paused in the hallways. Their eyes lingered a moment longer. Some nodded in silent acknowledgement. Others gave cautious, brief smiles. A few even dared to say it aloud. You were brave. But I wasn't brave. I was just tired of being disposable. That Thursday I got a message from Chris. Conference room 3B. 6:30, quiet. I knew what it meant. When I stepped into the dim, windowless room, he was already there, sitting at the head of the table like we were plotting something treasonous. In a way we were. There's more, he said. More. He pulled out a printed spreadsheet. One column showed the salary cuts across departments. The other showed executive bonus projections. They funneled every cent they cut from us straight into upper management incentives. My stomach twisted. Chris leaned back. And here's the kicker. They were preparing to spin it all publicly. Framing it as a cost optimization strategy. For shareholders. You weren't the only one. There were at least 6 others. Top performers all cut, all repackaged to inflate year-end margins. I closed my eyes for a second, holding back the familiar swell of nausea. So it was never about performance. He shook his head. It was always about perception. Perception. The cruelest currency in corporate America. That night, I stayed in the office long after the cleaning crew had left. I reopened my folder, now thicker, heavier. The story it told wasn't just about me. It was about everyone like me. Everyone who had been used, chewed up, silenced. And I made a decision. Not just to protect myself, but to expose everything. On Monday morning I didn't go to my desk. I went to HR. Dana, the assistant who had unknowingly handed me the first breadcrumb, looked up as I entered. Mandy. I need to file a formal grievance, I said, voice steady. And I need it escalated to the board. She blinked, then slowly nodded. You have supporting documents. I handed her the envelope. I have everything. The process began that same afternoon. Quiet, clinical, careful. Meetings with legal. Interviews. Questions. Disbelief. Then slow, creeping anger. Not directed at me, but at the betrayal buried in the data I had handed over. 2 days later, I was called into a conference room on the top floor, a place usually reserved for client summits or corporate audits. But this time it was just me. And 3 board members. Mandy, the chairman began, hands folded neatly on the table. We owe you an apology. I stayed silent. He cleared his throat. Your documentation. It exposed a pattern. Not just poor judgment but calculated manipulation. You weren't just mistreated. You were weaponized. I looked him straight in the eyes. I know. They offered me reinstatement. Full salary. Retroactive. Plus an additional compensation package for the stress and damages caused. I declined. Because something in me had already moved on. Later that evening, I sat in my car parked across the street from the building. The same one I had once thought I'd retire in. I watched the lights flicker on and off floor by floor. So much of my life had been built in that tower. Late nights, wins, failures, friendships. And yet, now it felt like a monument to something I had outgrown. Not because I'd changed, but because I'd finally remembered who I was before they tried to convince me I was small. I didn't sleep much the night after the board meeting. Not because I was anxious, but because I felt unmoored. For the first time in years, there was no fire to put out. No email I needed to obsessively reread. No invisible blade dangling over my head. It was quiet in a way I didn't recognize, and part of me didn't trust it. So I sat in my apartment, knees pulled to my chest, the city humming softly outside, and thought about everything I had lost. I thought about the girl I used to be, fresh out of college, hungry, hopeful. The one who wore cheap suits and stayed late without being asked. The one who believed hard work was its own armor. And I thought about the woman who had emerged on the other side of this war. Not harder, just clearer. The next morning I typed my resignation. It was short, gracious, free of anger. I thanked them for the opportunity. I wished them well. And then I closed my laptop and walked away. Because staying in a place that only values you when it needs to clean up its mess, that's not loyalty. That's self-abandonment. I owed myself more than that. 2 weeks later, I was standing in the sunlit lobby of a different building. One that didn't smell like stale coffee and quiet resentment. This one smelled like clean air, fresh flowers, and the possibility of something new. The same client whose deal had triggered my so-called performance concern had heard about what happened, quietly, through the industry grapevine. And without fanfare, they offered me something rare, a chance to start over on my terms. Director of Client Strategy, better pay, better culture, a team that wanted to build, not bleed people dry. The offer came with a handwritten note from their CEO. We watched how you handled yourself. Integrity like that isn't just rare, it's priceless. We'd be honored to have you. I didn't cry. But I did feel something bloom in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Belonging. Earned. Not given. On my first day, as I stepped into the elevator and caught my reflection in the mirrored walls, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Gone was the quiet, cautious smile. Gone were the tired eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the wariness that never let her exhale. What I saw instead was someone rebuilt. Someone who had walked through betrayal with her head held high, gathered her broken parts with precision, and stitched herself back together with steel thread. Stronger, wiser, free. I smiled genuinely for no one but myself. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to prove my worth. I was living it. That afternoon I found a quiet moment to call Chris. He answered on the first ring. So, I walked away. There was a beat of silence. Then, Parks. Suspended. Pending formal dismissal. Legal's involved now. They've got more than they expected. Chris let out a low whistle. And you? New job. Different skyline. Better people. God, he breathed. You really did it. No, I said softly. We did it. You helped me remember I wasn't crazy. Or alone. Another pause. You ever need anything, you let me know. I will. And I meant it. Because in this world of boardrooms and betrayal, you don't survive alone. Not really. You survive by finding the few people who still believe in truth, and holding on to them like lifelines. The days that followed felt unreal. Not because they were filled with celebration or confetti, but because they were so still. After months of bracing for impact, of holding my breath and swallowing rage, there was nothing but clean air. Every morning I walked into my new office, sun-drenched, quiet, untouched by politics, and sat at a desk that didn't carry ghosts. My name was etched on the glass outside the door. Mandy Calloway, Director of Client Strategy. No parentheses. No asterisk. No whispered disclaimers about being reassigned or performance reviewed. Just my name. And I had earned every letter of it. It wasn't until the third week that the ripple effect began. I was in a morning briefing when a Slack notification buzzed my phone. Then another. And another. I excused myself, heart thumping. Something about the rhythm of the messages told me it wasn't work. When I opened the app, a flood of links and screenshots hit me all at once. Breaking. Former CEO of Avidon Group under investigation for bonus fraud. Whistleblower sources confirmed. Exclusive. Executive manipulated salary cuts to inflate personal bonuses. Whistleblower document leaked. CEO suspension turns criminal. Board sources confirm internal ethics breach. There it was. In black and white. The story I had lived through, the betrayal, the strategy, the systemic rot, had gone public. They didn't name me. Not directly. But I didn't need them to. People knew. Chris messaged one word. Boom. That night I couldn't stop shaking. Not with fear. With release. All those nights I'd spent wondering if I should have just stayed quiet. All the second-guessing, the inner battles, the weight of thinking maybe I had ruined my own future. They evaporated. In their place was something fierce and bright. Not joy. Not revenge. Just justice. I sat on my balcony for hours. City lights glittering below like constellations carved into asphalt. I thought about the people still trapped inside companies like the one I'd left. Afraid, silenced, convinced their survival required sacrifice. Doesn't. No paycheck is worth your peace. No title is worth your dignity. And no lie is worth carrying alone. The next day, I received an email from a woman I didn't recognize. Her name was Julia Harper. She had worked in Avedon's legal department before being quietly let go during the same restructuring wave I'd endured. Mandy. I don't know if you remember me, we barely crossed paths. But I read the story. I saw the documents. I knew something was wrong back then, but I couldn't prove it. You did. Thank you. Thank you for doing what I didn't have the courage to. For all of us. I sat back, the screen blurring slightly. Julia wasn't the only one. Over the next few weeks, I received message after message. From strangers, former colleagues, people from other companies who saw their own stories reflected in mine. They weren't just thanking me. They were remembering their own strength. And that, more than any promotion or payout, was the real victory. I didn't respond to most of the messages. I didn't have to. Their words weren't for closure. They were a beginning. Proof that truth ripples outward whether you see it or not. Proof that silence can be broken, and when it is, it echoes. The morning it all came to a close, I wasn't in a boardroom. I wasn't at a podium, or in front of a camera, or even dressed in a power suit. I was walking through Central Park, coffee in one hand, the other tucked into my coat pocket, feeling the crispness of late fall whisper around me like peace. That's when the notification lit up my phone. Leonard Parks formally terminated. Company releases statement acknowledging ethical violations. Whistleblower vindicated. There it was. Final. Undeniable. It wasn't just whispers in the hallway anymore. It wasn't a quiet investigation buried under spreadsheets. It was the headline. The truth. Stamped in bold font across every business publication worth its salt. I stopped walking and stared at the screen. And then, for the first time since this began, I let myself feel it fully. Not vengeance. Not satisfaction. Relief. That cold knot I'd carried for months, lodged between my ribs, coiled like a fist around my lungs, finally unclenched. The last ghost of doubt exhaled and drifted into the wind. People always expect revenge to be explosive. To come with slammed doors and shouting and power moves in corner offices. But real revenge, the kind that sticks, it's quiet. It's a resignation letter written with dignity. It's documentation stacked meticulously. It's a name cleared without fanfare. It's rebuilding in silence, and rising when no one thought you could. It's walking away whole. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a leadership event. The theme was integrity in the corporate age. I almost declined. But then I thought about every version of me that had survived to get here. The one who stayed late to prove her worth. The one who broke down in a bathroom stall after reading that first email. The one who stood quietly in the back of the conference room while the truth unraveled a man who thought himself untouchable. They deserved to speak. So I said yes. The auditorium was full. Quiet. Respectful. Expectant. And when I stepped up to the microphone, I didn't talk about metrics or deals or titles. I said, I used to believe hard work was enough. That loyalty would protect me. That success would speak for itself. I was wrong. In the end, the thing that saved me wasn't my record. It was my voice. And if you're sitting here today doubting your own, don't. Speak it. Even if it shakes. Even if no one listens at first. Because your voice is the one thing they can never take from you. And one day, it might be the only thing that brings the truth into the light. The applause was thunderous. But I wasn't looking for noise anymore. I was looking for sparks. And I saw them. In the eyes of the interns, the middle managers, the women in the back row gripping notebooks like lifelines. I walked off the stage into a life I had reclaimed. Not one handed to me. Not one granted by a boardroom. One I built. Piece by broken piece. And if you're still reading this, maybe it's because you needed to hear it. You're not alone. If they try to cut your voice from the story, write a new one. If they make you small, grow louder. And if they try to reduce your worth to a line item in a bonus report, remember this. You're not a number. You are the reason those numbers exist.